Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
At Level Blue, we simplify securing your most valuable business assets by providing broad cybersecurity experience and award-winning services. Level Blue manages the risk. You reap the reward. Learn more at levelblue.com.
And hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine. This is Sean Martin, your host. And if you listen to the show, you know I get to talk to lots of cool people about lots of cool things. And today is no different. Thrilled to have Steve Wilson on the show again. How are you, Steve?
Great. Thanks for having me, Sean. Excited to be here again.
Yep. Good to chat with you. And we did a little preview of your session at OWASP Global. And I was like, I need to have you back for a deeper dive on AI, what it means to do responsible development using AI. And of course, we'll touch on a bit of the OWASP top 10 again as well. But I really want to dig into the book that you have coming out. I guess it's available now in digital format and available soon in print.
Yeah.
Look at that. Nice.
This way. So
Developer's Playbook. Yes. Fantastic. And this is a topic that early days of my career, I was doing AppSec before it was called DevSecOps and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And it's something that I want to dig into quite a bit more. So I'm thrilled to have you on again to talk through this book and what it means to securely and safely develop using AI. So we're going to get into that, but maybe a few words about what you're up to in your current role, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I feel like I spend all my work time and all my hobby time on the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. So in my day job, I'm the chief product officer at Exabeam, which is a cybersecurity company that focuses on, using AI technologies to analyze the massive amounts of security data that you're streaming in from all of your systems and help you find and remediate threats. And really my hobby has become large language model security. And that started when I spun up the OWASP top 10 group for large language models last year. We talked a little bit about that. That just blew up way faster than I thought it might have. And a couple months after starting that project, I actually got a cold email from Nicole at O'Reilly who said, "Hey, do you want to write a book about this?" And I've spent the last 12 months working on that. So I'm excited to get it out.
Well, that answers the first question of what was the prompt or the catalyst. So clearly no lack of passion for the topic, and clearly no interest or no lack of interest on the other side, looking for somebody to write a book about it. So I don't know where to start here, because I think when we look at AI from a content creation perspective, used in sales and marketing and advertising and creating stuff like that, you put a prompt out there, you get something back. It's just a different way of producing similar results to what you already do in your current role, if you will. When we start looking at AI-enabled apps, I get mixed kind of positions on, well, it's just an app. It just happens to use a new API to interact with some other service. Or no, it's not just an app. There's a lot going on with AI as a service. And how do you use a public service? Are you building your own LLMs and your own models? And how are you getting the data? So my perspective is it's a whole different world once you connect your app to AI. But I want to get your perspective on this as well.
Well, I think the first version that's interesting is kind of where you immediately jumped from a use case perspective, because that's changed so dramatically in the last 2 years. People who've been working on AI for a long time, the AI use cases were, can I do image recognition or things like that. So it was about recognizing things and predicting outcomes. The idea of producing new work with an AI tool was just beyond the scope of possibility. And that's why we've latched onto this term generative AI, is that all of a sudden AI is building new things. We can debate the term new, but it's definitely creating these things. And so the way I think about it is there's kind of three broad classes of applications that you get built out of large language models today. And they're overlapping, and an app can have characteristics of all three, but I think it's helpful. So first thing you think about is a chatbot, right? And ChatGPT is a chatbot. It's designed to interact with the user on a wide range of topics. It's driven by prompting. It sort of starts with a blank slate, and the user tells it what to do. Those are interesting, but as you say, they're kind of very open-ended. As you go down the spectrum, they get more and more focused, and maybe more focused on potentially business value. So the next one is what we term co-pilots, and that term's gotten to be really popular. Some people, including Exabeam, use it as part of their brand. So we have a co-pilot for cybersecurity professionals. Microsoft is building Copilot into Microsoft Office. And the basic gist of a Copilot is it's not completely open-ended. It's not just working against this massive knowledge base it learned with training. It's actually interacting with you and your data to focused outcomes and trying to make you more productive in particular areas. And I think that's a different use case. There's a different set of constraints. And then there's the one that's super hot right now, and I'd say in the last few months really has boiled up as the area of research, which is autonomous agents. So in the Copilot case, still primarily the human driving and the AI assisting. In the autonomous agent case, what you're seeing more and more is you're giving the agent a goal, and it's pulling the problem apart into multiple steps and trying to execute to them and get to that goal with as little human intervention as possible.
It's a rare occasion when I'm taking so many notes while I'm also recording the episode. There's so much to unpack here, and I want to get into the three, but I want to go back to you calling out that I called out a use case. Mm-hmm. And for me, there's another area that I think we might struggle with, because, and I can't remember if I mentioned this on a previous episode, but back in the day when I was doing quality assurance, you could pretty much write a set of use cases, user stories, user scenarios, and whatnot that you could test against. Now, mm-hmm. It might be huge, and you might choose to segment it or alternate based on priority and probability of that use case happening and the risk associated with it. Basically, you can slice and dice I'll say a somewhat finite set of use cases. Once you start wrapping, and especially with these three, and maybe we talk about these three in this context of using AI to generate new data sets, new tasks and automation, new orchestration and code development and all this stuff. How do we get and if so, how do we get our hands wrapped around all the different use cases and potential outcomes that might come along, and know that we're doing something that's not vulnerable, harmful, right? All the other things, impacts privacy, all the other stuff that we have to think about with security and privacy.
I think fundamentally, when you think about it, there is this long list of things that we do with traditional software to assure the quality of it, whether it's, correctness, think pure QA, or security with AppSec. And one of the things I like to tell people is we can have all the debates that we want about AGI and consciousness and science fiction fun stuff, but you fundamentally have to treat these systems more like people than you're probably comfortable doing, because they react more like people. That's what they're designed to do. And what that means is that they don't always answer the same question the same way. which means I can't write one test and say this is the answer, and if you don't give me that answer, there's a bug. You start there and you realize you're dealing with something much more general. And then you look at the base terminology. I'm not programming the LLM, I am training the LLM. And that means from a methodology point of view, you might want to think about the full cycle here as education and evaluation rather than development and testing. So I'm trying to teach the LLM to do something, and then I'm trying to evaluate how good it is at it. And there's new sets of tools, and we should get into this, but there are new sets of tools that are being developed today that are designed to do just that.
Can we, and I'm thinking of a use case that I came across. It's probably been at least 8 months, if not a year now, that I looked at this. But you talked about the systems looking or acting more like people than a machine, perhaps. And what immediately came to mind is I was evaluating some proof of concept software. There was new forms, some new ways to engage with potential customers, prospects, and customers, where typically you'd have a radio button list or a drop down or yes or no, right? A toggle on or off. And then you might answer things with your name, and there might be some short form fields to fill in as well. But what I saw in this prototype was a lot of this stuff was entry. You enter blocks of text, and the blocks of text would then be analyzed to determine how it interacted with you down the line, which then determined the outcome. And so in that sense, I guess what are some of the challenges? I don't know if you want to tie it back to that's kind of like a chatbot. Basically, it's a form-based chatbot, but it could potentially lead into Copilot. And I don't know about the last one, but how do organizations need to look at this from a development perspective? Are there ways to put parameters on how this stuff works? And because let's be honest, it's creating new stuff on the back end based on the stuff that the user is feeding, right? That then it uses to make decisions and perhaps automate some things on behalf of that user or behalf of the organization.
Well, I think the thing that we look at from a development perspective, one of the core concepts of large language models is this concept of what's called attention. And you'll hear people talk about this. There was a seminal research paper that got published by some crew at Google 7-8 years ago called "Attention is All You Need." And it was a fundamental rethink about how you do neural networks and how you deal with basically short-term memory. And this created what we hear bandied around a lot on LLMs, which is what's called a context window, which is as you're interacting with ChatGPT, every question is not a new discussion. It's remembering earlier parts of the discussion. And so if you ask a particular question and you ask it first or you ask it third, you're very likely to get different answers. And so when you think about this from a security perspective, it really does hammer home how it's hard to write what you would call traditional unit tests on something like this. And where this really leads is we are developing an industry of security tools for LLMs where people have been rethinking these problems. And so, for people who are in AppSec, they're comfortable with SAST tools and DAST tools. And I would say there's a lot of work doing that I'd say is very equivalent to really advanced AI-enabled DAST tools that are out there. And some of them are commercial, some of them are open source. It's a very popular open source one called Garrick. It's named after a character from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I understand from talking to the founder of the project. But it enables you to sort of create more flexible test cases and evaluate the output out of that a little bit differently. And I think that's really important. The other thing that we find is, much like in AppSec, you have things that you do at development time and things that you do at runtime. And I think at this point, the idea of truly analyzing things with static tools, that's super, super hard. So you're using things like DAST, but you're also using things that look like RASP and WAF. So web app firewalls, runtime application protection. You really need things that are watching the thing run. And what this comes down to is a lot what people talk about these days is called guardrails. And you can talk about it very generically as I'm trying to keep the LLM walled in to a particular use case and doing what it's designed to do, because it's so easy to take these things off track. And, just super simple examples. There was a car dealer, hired somebody to make them a chatbot to help give out information on the cars. Somebody quickly hacked it to start selling someone else's cars, and then they hacked it to sell them a car for $1. And, that was obviously not what the developer intended. So how do you build a set of guardrails around that to keep it on track and keep it focused on what it's supposed to be doing? And so those guardrails in a lot of ways become analogous to a WAF or a RASP. And in fact, you see them implemented different ways, where some of them are network level that feel very much like a next gen app firewall. And you actually see some companies out there that produce those that are starting to integrate in LLM features. And then you see these other kind of guardrails frameworks that the developer would basically be plugging into the code. But writing those guardrails yourself, I show in the book how you can basically, like, here's where you'd kind of plug in, here's where you'd start to put some defenses. And I show some simple ones. But as we talked about, the idea that you're going to write a set of regular expressions to look at what's coming in or out of this and pretend that you can really interpret it, you can't. So you're going to need something much more sophisticated. And so there are, companies as large as NVIDIA. NVIDIA has an open source project called Nemo Guardrails, and it's open source, it's free, but it's designed to help developers with those problems.
Yeah, because, I was going to say all the permutations you need that are thinking, right? "Quote unquote" thinking. you need something to think as well. You described in runtime. I'm wondering, and you described some of the things in the middle of SAST and DAST, but how important is it to do something at the design and architecture point?
So important.
Do we know enough to do that successfully, or do we have to experience some pain in runtime to know what to design away or in at the
it's such an astute question, and I'll kind of walk through some different pieces of the answer. But having worked at an AppSec company before, I remember when the rally turned into shift left. We're gonna do everything left. We're gonna do it early, and I think that mantra actually hurt AppSec, because it got to this idea that you don't need to think about it through the full life cycle. Just do testing early and you're good. And I think that was a miserable failure. But I think if instead of saying shift left, you just say start early, and that doesn't mean that you're only doing things at one point. Start early does start all the way back at product management. And I've been a developer since I was a kid, but I'm mostly professionally, I'm a product manager now. I don't write nearly as much code as I used to. And so I do think about these as product management problems. And when you look at the LLM top 10 that we developed at OWASP, a couple of these firmly start at product management discussions. And I'll give you a couple quick examples, but one of them is what we call over-reliance. And it's the idea, we've talked in the past year or two a lot about the idea that large language models tend to hallucinate. They will, under certain circumstances, make up answers. And we get into the mathematics of why that happens, but it happens, and it happens a lot. By itself, it can actually be kind of creative and fun, but in the wrong situation, it becomes really dangerous, and it actually becomes a security problem in some really interesting ways. Security problems, safety problems. So the concept of over-reliance has to do with, have we designed the system in a way with capabilities that fit with its ability to actually deliver from a reliability point of view? Because these things are not going to be 100% reliable. So from a product management perspective, how do I find use cases where I can deal with that, mitigate it, minimize it? How do I communicate with the users what my level of certainty is around these things, and what kind of things can they depend on from those answers? The other one that's one of my favorite ones is what's called excessive agency. And this one really is a common product management discussion, which you start with a simple version of something. Users get excited about the capability, and you say, then I'm gonna add more, right? So it's one case might be you produce a co-pilot for your financial analysis to look at your stock portfolio and help you find better trades. Like, cool. People start to get excited about it. Starts to feel good. And they say, couldn't you just execute the trades for me? And at that point, I'm giving the thing agency, right? I'm giving it a goal and letting it execute to it. And if the advice it gives you on the stock isn't great, you're still in the loop. You're the one making the decision. You're just taking some advice. If the bot goes mad and starts trading on your stock and, drills you into the ground, that's really bad. The end case example I give of this is one that I go into in the book, and I have a chapter late in the book that people have told me is a lot of fun, which I just break down some actual science fiction examples. We've all dealt with rogue AIs in fun movies. And so I dissect a few. And the obvious one to do is HAL 9000 from 2001. And, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, but HAL turns off the life support systems at the end and kills most of the crew. Now, there was a lot of talk in that movie where they set it up very carefully that HAL was super reliable, super debugged, had never made a problem or made a mistake. But at some point, you're going to make a mistake. And if you give it the agency to turn off the life support systems, it just might do it. And that's a product management decision.
So as developers building stuff here, because we can maybe unpack this in terms of who's delivering what piece of the human-like system that we're trying to build. And you talk about reliance and then excessive agency. So how do developers, and probably more specifically product managers, then figure out how to leverage this stuff in a safe way? Because I think if you're not building the large language model yourself, you're using somebody else's. Are you thinking other examples where we say, well, we know this, we trust this vendor, so we're going to trust their model, right?
Yeah.
And their service, or their data, or we're using their model and we trust our own data, so we'll do things a little differently that, or we're building our own models. So I guess, is there an easy button, an easy path, or do you have to build it all yourself, or can you rely on others? And if so, how do you navigate that?
So this was a big revelation, sort of writing the book, and it was one of the reasons to do it, which is the reaction to the OWASP top 10 was so positive, right? And just hundreds of thousands of people have downloaded that and gotten a basic understanding of the risks that come with this new style of computing. And that's awesome. But actually, one of the things we see right now is security concerns scaring people away from putting any of this stuff into production, because they've learned that those risks are out there and they don't have answers. So the big part of the way I structured the book is, the first part is just making sure that you kind of understand the technology. How does it fit together? What are the security trust boundaries? And make sure you kind of understand the technology, because we have people coming from different places reading the book. Some people are AppSec people trying to, understand the AI technology. Some of these people are AI people who've been working on AI forever, but they've been working on back office applications that never had to touch a user. So a lot of level setting. The middle part goes through the vulnerabilities and just goes far more in depth than the top 10 list can. But the last third of the book is really about answers. And part of the book is around basically how do you build on your DevOps process, build on your DevSecOps process to include new components that you need to evaluate this new kind of software, to test for it, to protect it. And so there are fields which have cropped up, and they call themselves things like ML ops and LLM ops, which are all designed to fit in there. And there's some really good learnings in those frameworks. But what I'm trying to do here is give people a framework for just thinking about how do I extend that DevSecOps mindset in the ways that I need to. And then the last chapter really goes into basically a framework that I call the responsible AI software engineering. So RAISE framework. And, it goes all the way down to a checklist of about 10 things that you've got to look at. And the feedback I've gotten is when you get it reduced down to a checklist that says, oh, okay, yeah, there's all those problems. But if I do these 10 things, have I expunged all the problems? No, some of these are hard problems, but it gives me a place where I can go start hardening this, start to really understand what the risks are, not in the abstract, but the risks for my application. And so, you brought up this thing about, I'm getting somebody else's model. What does that mean from a risk perspective? Well, one of the things in the framework is how do you manage your supply chain? And it's a fundamental AppSec question. Fundamental here, just a different set of constraints, different set of pieces you're going to get from different places. So there's practices you can carry over, but there's a different set of individual tasks you need to do. And we walk through that for people. And, we do that basically in a number of different areas. We talk about what does a concept like zero trust mean in an LLM world? We all kind of understand what zero trust means, but I tell people with the way these language models behave right today, treat your LLM as somewhere in between a confused deputy and an enemy sleeper agent. That's how much trust you should be giving that thing based on all the other things that are out there. So it's going to do useful work for you, but you have to treat it with skepticism. And so how do I understand where I want to put trust boundaries around that core part of my software and check what's going in and what's going out? And how do I police that to be more comfortable with what's going on?
Yeah, a lot of human-based checks and balances. It's been my experience in the limited stuff that I've been working on.
The
things we do, we're not highly critical data.
One of the last things in the list there, and it's one people shouldn't overlook at all, is building a red team. And we've all had red teams in cybersecurity for a long time, but AI red teaming really has become its own discipline, and it's shocking how much this has caught the imagination of what's going on. I was watching a YouTube video. There's basically a snippet from C-SPAN from a Senate hearing, and there's Senator Chuck Schumer talking about guardrails and AI red teaming. And I'm like, that was not on my bingo card.
Yeah, it's catching the attention of a lot of folks. I presume the book, you kind of alluded to it, that it can help product managers and architects and designers and developers and testers and pen testers kind of get a grasp for things they need to think about. I'm wondering, do you feel we're in a position, and can the book help guide organizations, both with in-house development teams? And I would imagine a lot of companies are saying we want to outsource this, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have the expertise, so let's find an organization that can build an app for web and mobile that's AI enabled, that does X, Y, and Z. In those requirements that they provide, or in vetting the vendor to create the product for them, does the book help kind of say, we know enough, we have enough team, we have enough tooling to pull this off or not? Because I don't know, what I'm picturing is kind of like a scale of what the risk level is, and I think there's a lot of people say we don't care, we're just going to build. And then the other is, a lot of people don't do anything, kind of, I think what I heard you say. And then the other is the extreme of the large organizations that invest to figure this all out.
Yeah, so we're in a world where there's two megaphones shouting in your ears if you're involved in this stuff. And one of them is, if you're not doing Gen AI today, you're a dinosaur, you're going to get wiped out. It would be like a company in 1997 saying, I'm not going to build a website. I don't need that. That's scary. Somebody's going to steal my money if I build a website. And some of that happened, right? People's website got hacked. They lost people's credit card numbers. There were bad things that happened. But as a company, you couldn't say, I'm not going to do the internet because I haven't figured out how to do secure e-commerce yet. And then obviously the other thing that's getting shouted in your ear is there are really severe security risks. We don't go a week without seeing somebody having messed up, and it goes from car dealer in Watsonville all the way up to Microsoft and Google messing this up. We've seen recent examples with Microsoft Copilot and Slack where they're getting hit with indirect prompt injection attacks, which were the number one thing that we put on the OWASP list more than a year ago. And the biggest guys out there running into them. So this is real stuff. But what I will say is the reaction to the book has been great, because when I set out to start writing it, I mean, you can see from the title, I was thinking about software developers. But it's not a book that wound up with a lot of code in it. In fact, there's almost none. Because people are writing to so many APIs and so many frameworks and so many languages. It's more about the concepts. And the feedback I've gotten feedback from CEOs and chief information security officers all the way down to security engineers saying, hey, I really liked this. This gave me a framework to work from. So the advice I give people, in the last few pages of the book is, you have to go do this. You have to venture into this. Go out with your eyes open that it's dangerous territory, but there are big rewards out there, and the biggest risk is doing nothing. So you have to venture out there, but start with, once you're armed with a framework, you can think about things that are safe. And at Exabeam, that's what we did when we came out with our Copilot. There are a bunch of things that we made it not do, that we said we can get to later, but we came out with what we thought were the really high value, low risk use cases. And the feedback was amazing. We didn't need to do all of it to start to make a big impact where people are coming back and saying, hey, my productivity is 2 or 3 times faster because I have this. Even though we know there's a bunch more we can do, but we can walk that up very gradually and make sure that we have solutions as we go. And so that's what I tell people is venture out there. The rewards are there. Start small, build the muscle on your team so that you have people who understand this, and go get your feet wet.
Little MVP advice there, minimal viable product.
Product manager.
That's right. I love it. It's probably in your PRD as well. All right. So the book, The Developer's Playbook for Large Language Model Security, Building Secure AI Apps, with author Steve Whiteley. Look at that. There's the book as I read it on Amazon. Do grab a copy for the team, or multiple copies for the team. So you can start from requirements to design and architecture on through development and test. And as you pointed out, the pen test, the red teaming as well. And yeah, I think you've shined some light on this for me as well, because I abandoned a project because of the risk, I'll be honest. So I don't know, maybe we revisit it and maybe the tooling's better now for building and testing, and we'll see if there's something there. But great conversation, Steve, and congratulations on getting the book out there. Roddy's a great publisher, and hopefully lots of folks enjoy reading that and taking the learnings to their team. So.
Hey, Sean, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed the conversation, and let me know if you spin that project back up. Love to hear it.
It's come up a few times in the last couple of weeks, so I don't know. There might be something there. We'll see. But regardless, it's been fantastic chatting with you, and hopefully everybody enjoyed this conversation. Please do stay tuned for more here on Redefining Cybersecurity as I dig more into AppSec and SecOps and everything in between. And please connect with Steve, grab a copy of his book, and we'll see everybody out and about and here online. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sean. Bye.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.